to be exploring the use of silicone moulds and mica powder in your jewellery making with polymer clay. So I'm going to show you some of the silicone moulds I've got and talk to you about the best ways to use them, and then show you how we're going to incorporate the use of mica powder as well as another way of adding some more colour and dazzle to your jewellery. So I'm going to start by showing you some of my silicone moulds. So this first one here is a sea life theme silicone mould, and as you can see, the level of detail in these moulds, you've got the scales, the facial features, the fins. There's quite a lot of detail in these moulds, which if you were trying to create a fish out of polymer clay, for example, to get that level of detail, that accuracy would take a lot of skill, but also even with that skill, it's going to take you a long time, which is why we use moulds, because they're a really quick, effective way of getting some fantastic results and adding a lot of detail to your polymer clay. So that's my first one, and as you can probably tell, I use it quite a lot. Following on from the theme of sea life, I've got some seahorses, and I have a little octopus. And then I've got some more simple moulds. I use these because I do a lot of resin jewellery as well. So these can be used for both resin and polymer clay. So this one here is, I don't know if you can see that, but they're faceted. So when you create jewellery out using these moulds, it actually gives the illusion of a gemstone. And then another little one with hearts, more gemstones, some basic shapes, and a little cat themed one here with some paw prints. Okay, so as you can see, quite a big range of moulds available, and there are many more than this online. Best places to purchase, I would recommend looking online, several different websites, comparing prices. If you're willing to wait a little bit for delivery, you can buy moulds even cheaper, but it's important that you purchase silicone moulds, so they need to be pliable so that it's easy for us to remove the clay from the mould once you're happy with it. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the mica powders, which you might already be familiar with these. These are basically a really fine mineral powder that are used in makeup, so normally for eye makeup, and they come in a wide range of colours. As you can see here, there's just a few, but there's even bigger range than this available. And as you can see again, once you open the pot, really fine powder, so you don't need a lot of it to create and add a lot of colour to your polymer clay. So I would recommend, if possible, buying a set so you've got a variety of colours you can use. You'll also need a paintbrush to apply these, but this doesn't need to be a particularly snazzy paintbrush. It can be quite an old one that you're not using for anything else. So those are the mica powders, and next I'm going to show you how we're going to use them and the silicone moulds with our polymer clay. So I'm going to be using my Sea Life mould for this one, and I'm using a light coloured polymer clay so that hopefully this will show you the effects of the mica powders a little bit better as well. I'm going to start off by just warming up the clay in my hands a little bit just to make it more pliable and easier to use in the mould. And then I'm going to pop it into one of the moulds, and you've got to push right down to make sure that the clay reaches all the crevices and there'll be no gaps in your design. So I get to that point where I'm satisfied that the clay is reaching all parts of the mould that I want it to, but you've got this really uneven texture on the top. So what I tend to do is use one of my cutters or another flat surface to push down and create a more even surface. And what can sometimes happen with this is it actually makes it easier for you to remove it from the mould. So as you can see, you peel away the mould and you're left with this fantastic little fish. But this is not yet finished. Obviously we've got all this excess around the fish that needs to be trimmed away. So at this stage you're going to need to use your sculpting tools to trim off the excess clay. You might find that you've then got some uneven edges, so I would suggest, if you've got one, to use your silicone tool, one of these, to smooth over the edges. So I'm just going to do that next. And so when you're happy with the way that your polymer clay is looking, we can start to add the mica powder. So you want to grab your paintbrush And like I said before, you only need a small amount for this to become effective. So I'm going to start with some purple, and I'll put this down on his towel, just brush it onto the polymer clay. So this is before I bake it. You can see straight away is adding colour, but the amount of shimmer as well that it gives is lovely, especially when the jewellery is being worn and there's movement. It reflects the light and looks really effective. So for this one, I'm going to be placing some purple on his fins and down here as well. And then to contrast with that, I'm going to go with a completely opposite colour. I think I'm going to get something like orange to do the main body, so that you've got two contrasting colours. And so obviously if you've used a lighter coloured polymer, then the colour of the mica powder is going to show up a little bit more. If you've used a darker colour, you're still going to get a shimmery effect, but the actual colour of the mica powder might not be so obvious. But it would be good to just have an experiment and play around, because you might discover some lovely effects that way. And the good thing with the mica powder as well is that you can blend the colours together, so it won't look like the orange has just stopped and then the purple has started. You can sort of almost smudge it together and blend it so it looks a little bit more natural. And that's the end result. You hopefully can see that it's shimmering, which, especially for a mould like this where it's a fish, shimmery scales, it's quite a nice effect. Don't forget, if you want to actually use this to make a jewellery item from, before you put it in the oven, you're going to need to add a hole somewhere. So think about where you're going to want that hole to be. Is it going to be hung from a necklace like here, from here, or did you want to hang it this way around? So you might put a hole in one side of the towel, or even this way around. Entirely up to you, but remember to do that before you bake it. You might have already found out the hard way if you've forgotten to do that on some previous items, but this could be, if you don't want to put a hole, it could just be an experimental piece, just for your project work and to have a play around with. But make sure you put the mica powder on before you put it into the oven.